Good afternoon, good morning, Excellencies, officials, exporters, buyers, ladies and gentlemen. The Southern Africa Development Community, SADC, through its embassies in the United States and the US8 Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub, welcome you to day one of the virtual SADC Marketplace. With the today's session focusing on exporting to the United States. The purpose of the webinar today is to share information and also to promote exports from the region into the US in the agricultural and also agro-processed products. Next slide, please. Kindly note that all the sessions today and also tomorrow will be recorded. There is also interpretation services that is provided. While I'm on that, can I request all the participants to mute their mics so that there are no echoes coming? With regard to the interpretation for English, Portuguese, and French speakers, please go to the interpretation icon on the bottom of your screen and then choose your preferred language. We would also like to request that if you have any questions, either questions before coming into the event today or questions that will come as the speakers will be presenting, if you can please post questions in the chat box. You can post the questions in your preferred language and they will then be translated and be able to be posted to the speakers. And once again, just wanted to request that if you can keep your mics muted, except for the speakers when it is their opportunity to speak. My name is Malosi Letsoalo. I'm the Minister Economic at the Embassy of South Africa here in Washington, DC. I will be assisting to direct the program today, ensuring that we finish and also finish on time and the discussions can run as smooth as possible. What I would like to request while we are still here is to request that all the speakers to as far as possible to stick to the allocated time, and also to indicate that I will not be reading the bios of all the speakers. I will to save time, but all the bios will remain on the screen for the duration when the speaker will be speaking. With regard to the program of today, we have an exciting lineup of speakers, starting with the opening remarks by excellencies, and then we'll have presentations by our colleagues from the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative to speak on exporting to the U.S. under Africa Growth and Opportunity Act to generalize systems of preferences, and also under the Most Favored Nation treatment. We further have also officials that will be coming on from the U.S. Department of Agriculture and also from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration that will also be speaking about import requirements when exporting to the U.S. for agriculture and agro-processed products. To close off on the technical discussions, we'll also have a presentation on the logistics and also shipping to the United States. And then we'll have our Excellency, the Dean of SADC, closing the session for today. So without wasting any time, I would like to start with our first speaker to provide opening remarks. And it is my pleasure to introduce Her Excellency Noma India Mfeketo, the Ambassador of South Africa to the United States. Excellency, you have the floor, please.
His Excellency Francois Kuna Malumene, Ambassador of Democratic Republic of Congo to the US and Dean of SADC to Washington, DC. His Excellency Edward Saweringera, Ambassador of Malawi to US and the Chairperson of SADC Ambassadors in Washington, DC. His Excellency Craig Cloud, US Ambassador to Botswana, fellow SADC ambassadors to US, other US ambassadors to SADC countries, present government officials from both SADC countries and the US exporters from SADC region, buyers, importers and distributors from US and those based in SADC region. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to those joining us from US and a very good afternoon to those joining us from SADC region. It was a few months ago that ambassadors from SADC countries met at the Embassy of South Africa under the chairperson of His Excellency Carlos dos Santos, Ambassador of Mozambique to the US, and adopted a concept paper to work towards hosting SADC Marketplace. This was in response to realization by ambassadors that many of our exporters are either not aware of the opportunities in the United States under various market access regimes, such as Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. For those exporters from countries that are not eligible for AGOA, the question was whether they can export their products duty-free under the generalized system of preferences we call GSP, or under the most favored nation treatment, MFN. Further, ambassadors recognize that even with AGOA, GSP, or FMN, it is not automatic that exporters will access the US market. There are import requirements relating to labeling, sanitary and phytosanitary custom procedures, etc., that exporters need to meet. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, today it is a historic day that 14 countries under the umbrella of SADC are jointly hosting and participating in this webinar under the theme SADC Reliable Source of Fresh and Quality Products, to share information with exporters of these market access programs and import requirements. Tomorrow, there's an opportunity for business-to-business meetings to bring together exporters and buyers, and we are grateful to His Excellency Sawerengera, Ambassador of Malawi, for working hard with team of officials to ensure that today we have this event. Excellency Cloud, Ambassador of US to Botswana, representing all US embassies in SADC, we thank you and other US embassies in the region for your partnership and cooperation in promoting mutually beneficial trade and investment relationship. In particular, we would like to thank the USAID, Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub for providing for human and financial resources that enabled us to host this event in a very professional manner. We also thank the US agencies present, Office of the US Trade Representatives, US Department of Agriculture, and US Food and Drug Administration. Trade, not necessary aid, will help our countries to grow our economies and create much needed jobs, which will take people out of poverty. And therefore, I would like to encourage our companies, in particular SMEs, women and youth, owned enterprises, to use this opportunity to engage with US officials to understand the import requirements to increase their chances of success in the US market. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a very successful 2-day of SADC marketplace. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for the welcoming remarks, opening remarks of today's, and also for recalling on the theme of the event. Without wasting much time, I would invite His Excellency Craig Clout, Ambassador of US to Botswana, representing US embassies in SADC. Excellency, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. Allow me to begin by paying respects to the Dean of SADC Ambassadors and Ambassador of the Democratic Republic of Congo to the United States, His Excellency Ambassador Balumwene, Chairman of the SADC Ambassadors Group, His Excellency Ambassador Sawerengera, Ambassador of South Africa to the United States, Her Excellency Ambassador Mafeketo, Minister Economic Affairs at the Embassy of South Africa in the United States, Mr. Malosi Letsaulo, Head of Chancery, Embassy of Malawi in the United States, Ms. Margaret Wanza Gadabu, representatives of the 14 SADC embassies in the United States, representatives of the United States Department of Agriculture, United States Food and Drug Administration, and United States Customs and Border Protection, representatives from the private sector, distinguished participants, and ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I'd like to start by saying Hujambo, Bonjour, Mulibwanji, Mangwanane, Bon dia, Sawubona, and finally, where I am, Dumalan Baitsu. So there are so many things that unite the Southern African countries, but there are also so many things that bring us together. And I'm honored here to be giving opening remarks at the inaugural SADC Marketplace Exporting to the United States webinar. The intention behind today's event is to connect exporters from the SADC region in the agricultural and agro-processed product sector with experts on import requirements to the United States. There is an impressive lineup of speakers who will provide relevant updates to increase SADC firms' awareness of and compliance with U.S. market entry requirements. Bottom line, the overall goal of the SADC marketplace is for the SADC region to continue to enjoy a successful and mutually beneficial trade relationship with the United States. This event today is an opportunity to underscore the market entry services that the U.S. government, through the United States Agency for International Development's Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub, has been offering since 2016. Through the USAID Trade Hub, the U.S. government has collectively, within Southern Africa, facilitated more than $89 million in African intra-regional trade and exports to the United States, including through the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA. USAID is working with several trade promotion service providers across the region to assist regional exporters, including some of you present today, to meet the needed market entry requirements, such as attaining organic certifications, food safety certifications, U.S. Food and Drug Administration registration, and FDA-compliant label reviews. For example, through technical and financial support from USAID, South Africa-based Oryx Desert Salt was able to obtain Food Safety System Certification 22000 in July 2021. This enabled the firm to continue exporting its ethically harvested, naturally organic, and sun-dried gourmet salt and spices to the United States from Botswana. Also, through our support, DLG Naturals attained organic certification for its marula oil, which enables the firm to charge premium prices for its products in the U.S. market, while also taking advantage of trade preferences offered under AGOA, and ultimately resulting in increased profitability. Additionally, we've supported regional export firms to resolve complex challenges with shipping agricultural products to the United States and to adopt improved and innovative logistics management processes to get these firms' goods to the U.S. market. Through this event, we would like to reiterate that the SADC region is home to fresh, wholesome foods that can find a place in the U.S. market. That is why the U.S. government will continue to lend its support to firms seeking to access the resources they need to overcome market entry barriers and get their products to the United States. Allow me to recognize the collaborative spirit that made today's event possible. USAID, working in partnership with all 14 SADC embassies in the United States, has brought over 500 export firms from across the region to a Zoom trade platform, where they can get firsthand information on how to successfully access a new market. While projects such as the USAID Trade Hub will eventually come to an end, the tools, capacity, and networks that we have forged with partners will ensure that we continue to witness their impact in the journey to self-reliance. The U.S. government remains committed to supporting SADC countries to strengthen institutions that prepare exporters to understand important requirements and meet complex market entry requirements. I anticipate a successful inaugural SADC Marketplace webinar, which will set the stage for us to connect and develop rewarding trade relationships in the business-to-business event tomorrow. I look forward to seeing SADC's agricultural and agro-processed foods flourish as a well-recognized international brand with increased sales across the United States. I'm grateful for the efforts of all the parties here today to ensure that we overcome the challenges presented by the COVID-19 pandemic, and I know that we'll have a successful information sharing event. So thank you all. As we say here in Botswana, Kale Boha, it's great being here, and thank you very much.
Excellency, for the remarks and also for the support that the U.S. continue to provide to promote mutually beneficial trade and investment relationship, in particular exports to the U.S. It is my pleasure again to invite His Excellency Edward Sawerengera, Ambassador of Malawi to the United States, and also our chair of SADC ambassadors here in Washington, D.C., to also provide the opening remarks. Excellency, you have the floor, please.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Ambassador Balumene, DRC Ambassador accredited to the U.S. and the Dean of SADC Group of Ambassadors in the U.S. Your Excellencies, fellow ambassadors accredited to the U.S., Your Excellency Craig Cloud, U.S. Ambassador to Botswana, senior government officials from the U.S. Trade Representative, from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Mr. Andy Karas, USAID Southern Africa Mission Director, Dr. Golden Mahove, Chief of Party, USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub, senior government officials from SADC countries, distinguished business persons, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and good afternoon. I'm greatly honored to make remarks today as we commence our very first SADC Marketplace webinar with the hope of bringing together Southern African exporters and US importers in the agriculture and agro-processing sector to boost trade. As you all know, agriculture has a massive social and economic footprint in Africa. More than 60% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa are smallholder farmers, and about 23% of sub-Saharan Africans' GDP comes from agriculture. Despite being blessed with very fertile soils, which lead to high quality produce, Africa has not realized significant gains due to several challenges. These include low value addition to agricultural products, limited adoption and use of e-commerce, supply chain constraints, including high dependence on imports, just to mention a few. Sudden climate changes, natural disasters, limited infrastructure, and energy have further worsened these challenges. Additionally, as the whole world has not been spared, COVID-19 has further exacerbated these challenges and caused major disruptions to international trade. As we consider these challenges in general, we also face some challenges specific to the US market. These include financial constraints, such as access to capital, high transportation costs, cost of compliance with US standards and technical regulations, insufficient information on US market requirements, inadequate production capacity, and poor productivity. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this webinar hopes to address some of these challenges. There's much room for growth in US-Africa trade. Current agriculture exports to the US are less than 3% of total exports under the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. It is our hope that expanding opportunities for sub-Saharan African agriculture exports in the US will produce a range of benefits. These include boosting productivity at all stages in the value chain, thereby helping to transform African agriculture into a high productivity sector. The expanded opportunities in trade between Africa and the US may provide adequate incomes, stimulate economic growth, provide employment, and reduce poverty. Increasing agricultural trade also has the potential to improve food security and contribute to stabilizing local and regional food markets by making them less vulnerable to shocks. To overcome some of the challenges that I've mentioned, I encourage you business persons from the region to consider coming together for joint ventures to overcome supply constraints and meet the supply demands of the US market. I further encourage you to fully embrace industrialization as the most effective means of achieving the main goals of increasing exports to the US to bridge the trade deficit gap. I also hope that the informative sessions from the various US departments will bridge the information gap in terms of export requirements to the US market. I hope you find this information useful as you navigate the US market and take advantage of the various initiatives to facilitate trade, such as AGOA and the generalized system of preferences. I hope that through platforms such as these, companies in the region will harness e-commerce to increase gains and competitiveness as we maneuver together in these difficult times. On our part, as SADC Group of Ambassadors in the US, we'll do our best to continue working together with our partners to ensure that the region is not left behind. It is my hope that through this webinar, we will be able to tackle some of the challenges that I've mentioned, and that this is a start to many more engagements between SADC and US businesses and government. It will be remiss of me not to recognize and applaud the hard work and coordination that went into organizing this webinar. Special thanks should go to the USAID Trade Hub team led by Gordon Mahove, and the working group from the SADC group of ambassadors in Washington, D.C., as well as the US government officials. With these few remarks, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I now declare the SADC Marketplace webinar officially open. Thank you, and I look forward to the discussions to follow in the next 2 days. Muito obrigado, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Thank you very much for outlining the importance of agriculture in the SADC economies, but also the importance of exporting to the US. Let me also thank all SADC ambassadors and US ambassadors in SADC countries for their leadership and foresight in enabling us today to have this SADC marketplace. Thank you, Excellencies. At this point, I would like to now invite Mr. Robert Telchin, the Director for Africa Affairs at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative that is responsible for trade negotiations and also on programs like AGOA, GSP, and also on sugar. Robert will also be joined by his colleague, Ms. Joanne Hest, who is the Director for Agricultural Affairs, also at the Office of the USTR, and they will be together providing us with a presentation. Before I turn to Robert, let me also just remind the participant to please, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat box in your preferred language, either English, Portuguese, or French, and then it will then be put to the speakers towards the end of this event. Robert, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Melosi, and thank you everyone for hosting such an esteemed event over the next 2 days. I really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to be with you this morning or this afternoon. And I think the timing of this event is perfect because in just about 4 weeks or so, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, Ambassador Catherine Tai, will be hosting what we're calling a virtual AGOA Forum Ministerial. Obviously, the pandemic has prevented us from gathering in person, but we felt that we did not want to lose out on the opportunity to engage with our counterparts across the African continent. And so we've worked very closely with the African Diplomatic Corps in Washington to organize an event in a few weeks to hear the perspectives of different African governments as far as our trade relationship. And I know that the future of AGOA is high on everyone's mind. And Ambassador Tai is very interested in hearing perspectives of her government counterparts, as well as the private sector and civil society groups. The topic of today's event is obviously having a better insight into the different export opportunities for African firms and our tariff structures. And I'm not going to try and explain the entire American tariff structure in such a short period of time, except to say that it's complicated, and that we have both arrangements through MFN, which are reciprocal arrangements that come out of the framework of the WTO, but then the United States maintains two sort of interlinked trade preference programs. And if you've heard the term, trade preference program, it simply means that a country, it's a one-way opportunity. In other words, a country does not have to reciprocate on those opportunities. And those two programs are the Generalized System of Preferences, which allow countries to export roughly about 4,800 different products to the United States. And that program exists for not just for Africa, but for developing countries across the world. But then AGOA, which is all of you obviously know, comes in on top of GSP and provides preferences or opportunities for about 1,800 additional products. As some of you know, the GSP program lapsed. It expired at the end of last year, but AGOA did not. And so the AGOA eligible countries are still exporting as normal. As those of you are also aware, AGOA is set to expire in 2025. And we are, very interested in gathering the input of our partners. That's one of the main things Ambassador Tai is looking forward to discussing with her counterparts on the continent. In the end, this is a decision that is up to Congress, but we certainly are looking to get the input as far as, over the last 20 years, what has worked for countries, what hasn't. And we want to continue to have those sorts of conversations, the types of discussions that we'll be having over the next 2 days with this event. The SADC countries in the agricultural sector last year exported just under $1 billion worth of products to the United States, which I think in the pandemic is very impressive. It was about 960 million. Of that, about 370 million came into the U.S. under AGOA. One of the other bigger products that came in, which comes in under MFN, was vanilla, which is about a little less than 300 million. That came predominantly from Madagascar, but from some other SADC members as well. Other key products include goods like citrus fruits, which come in from under AGOA, ground nuts, predominantly macadamia nuts, as well as certain processed foods or goods like chili sauces and frozen sorbet. So there's a lot of great work that the private sector is doing. My colleague Joan is going to talk about sugar, but before that, I want to say that I think that the private sector and African governments have really done a tremendous job over the last 20 years to kind of unpack all the different kind of opportunities and requirements. And I think to continue to have to continue to lead that work. Many countries, I should say, in conjunction with the work of USAID, produced a very extensive what were called AGOA implementation strategies. I know some of those strategies came out by different SADC member states, even over the last year during the pandemic. Many of those reports are online, and I would encourage all the different members of the private sector to look up those reports. The government officials that might be new to working on issues related to trade with the United States, they're extremely valuable resources. Another resource before I conclude that I want to turn everyone's attention to is the biennial report to Congress that the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative produces every 2 years that contains a great deal of information, not just data, but also information on the interplay of AGOA and GSP, and has a lot of information, of really detailed information. So I would encourage you with additional questions that we're not able to answer over the next 2 days to consult to consult the biennial report to Congress, as well as the different implementation strategies that have been prepared. So with that, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Joan Hurst, who's our agricultural expert at USTR. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Robert, and good morning and good afternoon to all of you. You know, I was Melosi and to everyone who organized this, thank you so much for organizing this session today. And I really appreciated the remarks made by the various ambassadors, the excellencies that began this session today. In particular, the comments on exports to the United States, and also on the fact that we hope that this will build awareness of U.S. policies and technical requirements to enable exports to the U.S. As Robert laid out, there are many products that are exported, and I think he did a good job of summarizing the top 5 U.S. ag imports from the SADC, so products that you are sending to us, the spices, vanilla, fresh fruit, tree nuts, sugars and sweeteners. And, you know, I'd also note that there are other products as well. There's wine and related products. Robert mentioned gelato, and there's also some alcohols and processed fruit products that come in. So one of the things that I know was of particular interest is the sugar allocations in the sugar TRQ. And as you may know, there are a couple of resources for this, both press releases and statements from the Office of the Trade Representative, and also management of the program through USDA. So imports of sugar, as you may be aware, are governed by tariff rate quotas, which allow certain quantities of sugar to enter through a low tariff. The tariffs that are applicable to this region are the MFN tariffs, so created through the WTO system. USDA and USTR on an annual basis establish quota volumes for each fiscal year. Fiscal year in the United States begins Friday, October 1st. And we will allocate the TRQs among countries. And the allocations for these are historical allocations, so shares that specific SADC member countries receive through the historical allocation moving forward. In addition to that, there are tranches for specialty sugar, and USTR just announced on September 15th the fiscal year quota for 2022 that outlines the amounts for raw and processed sugar, and the structure for the specialty sugar quotas that will be opened in tranches. So that is what I have. I will provide these links to this additional information to the organizers to be shared with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanne, and also thank you very much to Robert for your presentation, and also for making yourself available, and also for outlining some of those agricultural products that can be exported to the US, indicating for those exporters that they are not currently exporting, there is still an opportunity for them to export to the US, and also sharing information on the sugar quota that the exporters from the SADC region can take advantage of. I would like now to turn attention to our colleagues from the US Department of Agriculture, Mr. Leon Ndete Lopez, Director of SPS Trade Policy, and also will also be joined by Mr. Jason, the Senior Trade Advisor at the US Department of Agriculture. Can I, before I invite Ms. Lopez to take the floor, can I also just request all the participants to mute their mics so that we have a less echoes coming from the background. Ms. Lopez, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Your Excellencies and distinguished guests for the invitation. With your permission, let me lower my video and focus on my remarks to strengthen the internet signal. Thank you. So I am SPS Trade Policy Director and for Africa and the Middle East. And I was asked to share lessons learned on ways to strengthen import and export to and from our countries. Let me say that a key area, key component is strengthening relationships. And I see that through a platform like this and others, this is a great venue for importers and exporters to meet each other, to strengthen their relationships, to strengthen ways and ideas to facilitate trade. But it's also a great venue for the private sector and government partners to strengthen relationships as well. And I say that because it's really critical for private sector importers who want to export into the United States to have good coordination and strong relationships with their governments in country, since their governments are the entities that have the official authority to issue market access requests to the United States, to our government in the United States. It's really the two governments who are working together to facilitate trade in terms of technical import-export requirements. But nonetheless, the information and the relationship that is being developed between the private sectors of each country and the internal government is critical. I would say that in the United States, for example, we have a very good and strong working relationship with private sector stakeholders who give us information not only about the commodities and the places that they want to export to, but also they give us information about the market visibility to certain places and information about the status of diseases and pests that affect crops so that we can mitigate those accordingly and develop more accurate risk assessments. So both from the policy, from the coordination, and from the scientific viewpoint, is really important that private sector stakeholders have strong working relationships with their in-country governments. I would also say that having strong relationships with your embassies in the United States. I mean, this is obvious from this wonderful event that is taking place now, but also on an operational basis where you can jointly identify short and long-term market access opportunities that would be based on SPS, but also on production and harmonized tariff schedules. Additionally, I would say that it's really important to have, for the private sector to have very good and strong working relationships with non-governmental organizations that have access to very modern technology that can help in technology transfer, that can help with trade facilitation through programs and demonstration projects. And I would say that there are some examples of that already going on with African Union partners throughout Africa. And the United States also has some very good outcome with that in Nigeria and Morocco as examples. So I would say those are some critical items to share, and we can share more information and information links with the organizers of this event for stakeholders to access databases online. Thank you.
No, my apologies for interruption, Ms. Lopez. There was just some sound at the back that I wanted to call attention to. Jason, you have the floor, please.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you to our distinguished speakers who opened the session and to the hosts. As you know, the US has high standards for our food safety for both domestic and imported products. We rely on the interlocking system of several agencies, just as you heard from Viandet a moment ago. The Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, or APHIS, is one of those. And another part of USDA is the Food Safety and Inspection Services, FSIS, who could not be here today. But just we wanted to highlight them as well so that you can understand how they play into this. The FSIS focuses on fresh and processed meat, poultry, and eggs to ensure that they are wholesome, they are unadulterated, and they are properly labeled and packaged to export into the US. Generally, they're focused looking at the system of the government of our trading partners to make sure their systems and oversight match those of the US. As Viandet said, our relationships with our trading partners is very key, and they are the ones who are supporting your abilities to export and to meet your desires for growth. And while the systems don't need to be identical, they must ensure that the imported products meet the same standards as those are produced here in the United States. This review our equivalence review is a key step in importing the meat, poultry, and eggs into the United States. Our agricultural attachés and specialists at our embassies are probably going to be one of your best resources in understanding this process and understanding how you can further identify your partners and buyers here in the US. So we encourage you to make sure you become familiar with those embassies wherever you may be, and then also look at the resources we have available on the USDA, US Department of Agriculture website, so that you can further understand as well and identify those partners. A key tip that we usually say for those looking to find partners is to take advantage of those trade shows that USDA is a partner with or hosts here in the United States and sometimes abroad, that they are a great resource once we can all start meeting together in person to identify your partners and those buyers. So again, thank you for your time and allowing us to speak, and we look forward to being able to answer your questions on our trading systems and how you can import into the United States. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Ms. Lopez, and also Mr. Evans for your presentation. There are already some questions that are coming on with regard to requirements and whether product qualify. We hope if you can remain so that when the Q&A comes, then you can assist to address some of the questions. Thank you very much for your presentation, and also stressing the importance of the cooperation and the relationship between private sector and government in resolving issues relating to agricultural market access. Without wasting much time, I would like to invite Mr. Jeffrey Reed from the U.S. Department of U.S. Food and Drug Administration to talk to us about import requirements for exporting to the U.S. for agriculture and agro-processed products, for addressing a number of issues, either the food facility registration or labeling. I know Mr. Reed normally requires a lot of time to make a presentation on this issue, but we hope he will be able to at least give us a summary in this. Mr. Reed?
Well, thank you so much, Melissa. And yes, I do like to talk about FDA requirements. I talk pretty quickly sometimes, but I will try to talk slowly for the sake of interpretation. So ambassadors and excellencies and participants, good afternoon from the US. just wanted to thank our SADC hosts as well as the USAID Trade Hub for the opportunity to present to you all on FDA safety and labeling requirements for imported food. So I'm going to forego my video as well and focus on my slides. So I will share my screen. Hopefully this will work, fingers crossed. And so, as I mentioned, I will be presenting on US FDA requirements for safety and labeling of imported food. I'm located within the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition at the US Food and Drug Administration. And as far as FDA regulated food products go, it's a great segue from the presentation that Jason just gave on our Food Safety and Inspection Service, our sister regulatory agency within the United States. FDA regulates most of the US food supply, including fresh fruits and vegetables, seafood, dairy products, spices, beverages, and that includes alcoholic beverages, coffee, tea, as well as some more exotic meats and game meats. This does include dietary supplements. They have their own specific safety and labeling requirements that I'm not going to go into today. But just generally to let you know that FDA regulates most foods that are imported. However, as Jason mentioned, the US Department of Agriculture, FSIS, regulates the safety and labeling of most commercially available meats, as well as poultry and processed egg products. So these are FDA's authorities over food. In general, they can fit basically on this one slide. There are substantive requirements, of course, under our Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act that the food not be adulterated, that is safe for consumption, and processed food is produced under our good manufacturing practice regulations to ensure a hygienic production environment. Also, that the food is not misbranded, meaning that it's properly labeled with all appropriate information for the consumer. And I'm going to go over a little bit of our labeling requirements today. Also, there are registration and notification requirements on a pre-market basis to FDA. And the major one of these is FDA's food facility registration requirements. So if your facility manufactures, processes, packs, or holds food for export to the United States, you do need to register your facility with FDA. And this is free and web-based. You can go to FDA's website and find the portal to input your basic information on your food facility. Also, you need to report what's called reportable food. That is food that has the probability of causing severe adverse health consequences or death. If that's distributed from your facility, you need to notify FDA within 24 hours that you discover the distribution. And then finally, for imported food, you're going to work with your importer to submit prior notice of the shipment so that FDA has advanced warning or advanced notice that the shipment of food is entering the United States. Jason did mention the equivalence requirement for FSIS regulated products, but FDA under our law does not have an equivalence requirement if you're importing FDA regulated food. Therefore, if you satisfy our registration and prior notice requirements and you produce safe and properly labeled food, then you are free to export without any FDA inspection or further administrative requirements. So I did want to touch briefly on our foreign supplier verification rule. For those of you familiar with the Food Safety Modernization Act, this was a major regulation under that act, which requires U.S. importers to share responsibility with their foreign suppliers for ensuring the safety of imported food. So this is a regulation that we impose on our U.S. importers here in the U.S., and they need to have a good food safety working relationship with their foreign suppliers, you folks, for example, in Southern Africa. So the FSVP rule is risk-based according to different types of food safety hazards, the importers and the foreign suppliers used by the importer. There are flexibilities in meeting FSVP requirements. That is, you may have a third party come in and assess you as a foreign supplier, assess your activities as a foreign supplier on behalf of the US importer. There's also alignment with our preventive controls regulation. that applies to processed food facilities, particularly the supply chain provisions of that regulation. So the purpose of the FSVP is to provide adequate assurance that foreign suppliers produce food using processes and procedures provide the same level of public health protection as our FSMA preventive controls or produce safety provisions. Generally, the foreign supplier and the U.S. importer, more appropriately, the U.S. importer, needs to receive assurances that the food is not adulterated or misbranded, particularly with regard to allergen labeling. So the principal FSVP requirements for importers are to use qualified individuals to conduct their FSVP activities. They need to conduct a hazard analysis, that is, to understand the food safety hazards that are present in the manufacturing process of the foreign supplier. Once they do that, they need to evaluate the food and the foreign supplier and have procedures for ensuring that they're receiving food only from approved foreign suppliers. So your U.S. importer will actually approve you as a foreign supplier under the FSVP regulation. U.S. importers need to determine and perform appropriate supplier verification activities. They need to take corrective actions when it's needed, when there's a food safety issue with regard to the food safety plan. And they need to ensure that the importer is identified as an FSVP importer at entry. And of course, they need to maintain records to document that they are conducting all of these activities. So I'll now turn briefly to some FDA food labeling regulations. I would note that labeling is a particularly technical area of regulation. We do have a food labeling guide that I'll mention on our website. It's over 300 pages, and it is very important that food labeling is done correctly so that your food is able to enter the U.S. Many of our non-compliance issues with food imports have to do with food labeling. So our labeling requirements are found in our Code of Federal Regulations. Title 21 is what contains our food and drug regulations, and Part 101 is food labeling, labeling for human foods. It has these 7 subparts, and I'll speak a little bit to a few of these. So what actually must be on a food label of processed food to be sold in the United States? There's a statement of identity, there's a net quantity of contents, there's a name and place of business, and there's an ingredient statement. So just some general basic information of what's in the food and who produces it. Also, there is nutrition labeling, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. Allergen labeling as well, I'll touch on that. And any other material facts about the food in terms of safety or preparation or instructions for use, those sorts of things. For our foreign suppliers, it's important to note that if the label has any text in a second language, then all requirements must be both in English and in the second language. So first of all, we have the principal display panel, or essentially the front of the food package. So our regulations define this as the portion of the label most likely to be seen by the consumer at the time of purchase. A package can have alternative principal display panels, I would note. Your principal display panel must contain a statement of identity, that is the name of the food, as well as the net quantity of contents statement, or the amount in the food package. So for example, down here, if you can see my pointer, we have the premium saltine crackers. Saltine crackers is the statement of identity. And below it, in very tiny print, we have the net weight, which is the net quantity of contents statement. Over on the right side, of course, we have frozen mixed vegetables and sauce, and the net quantity of content statement. Now, to the immediate right of the principal display panel, we have what's called the information panel. If that panel is unusable, then you go to the next panel to the right, and so on. Now, the information panel contains these 4 elements. It contains the nutrition facts label, unless your food's exempt. It contains an ingredient list. It contains any applicable allergen information, and it contains the name and address of the manufacturer, packer, or distributor of the product. So on the right, we have a pretty good template or mock-up of the nutrition facts label, the ingredient list, and the name of the manufacturer. Now, in terms of nutrition labeling, this is found at 21 CFR Part 101.9, and it's required for most FDA-regulated food products offered for sale. The serving sizes we get quite frequently based on a reference amount customarily consumed or what a consumer typically consumes in one sitting. So you'll see on the nutrition facts label, we have servings per container, we have serving sizes, calories in large type. We have daily values for things like fat, cholesterol, sodium, carbohydrates, fiber, sugars, and including added sugars now, as well as protein. And then we have nutrient levels that are required in terms of vitamin D, calcium, iron. I would note that a few years ago, the FDA did update our nutrition facts panel, based on our nutrition labeling regulations from the early 90s. So it was the first major update of our nutrition facts panel. And so it's important to use the most up-to-date regulations when you're looking at nutrition facts panel, nutrition labeling. I did mention there are exemptions and special labeling provisions. These are in 101.9 subpart J. There are small business exemptions. There's an insignificant amount of nutrients in food, such as plain tea. Those types of products don't need nutrition facts labeling. Medical foods and infant formula have their own regime for nutrition labeling. And excuse me, fishery products, raw fruits and vegetables, it is voluntary to label that. So generally, if a food contains a nutrition claim or other nutrition information, then it must have a nutrition label, and nutrition labeling in another country's format is not permitted. Now, there are allergen labeling requirements as well. The 8 major food allergens under US law are milk, egg, fish, crustaceans, shellfish, tree nuts, wheat, peanuts, and soybeans. So it's important that for tree nuts, fish, and shellfish that you also list the species within the ingredient list. And there is advisory labeling that you can do, such as may contain or made in the same facility, but that may not be used as a substitute for good manufacturing practices. And generally, labeling must be truthful and not misleading. So there's 2 ways to do allergen labeling. You can do the name of the allergen within the ingredient list, or you can do a contain statement afterward. So here's a tour of the FDA labeling websites. There's the food labeling guide, as I mentioned, and then the Code of Federal Regulations you can find as well. There's a nutrition facts labeling updates for all the updates that I mentioned to our nutrition facts labeling requirements. Allergen labeling, as well as label claims, which also get fairly technical. So just to summarize our labeling elements, we have the principal display panel. You need a statement of identity, which is the name of the food, and the net quantity of contents, which is how much food's in the package. And on the information panel, you'll need a nutrition facts panel and an ingredient statement to tell the consumer what's in the food, as well as the name and place of business or who makes the food. So with that, I'll end my presentation there. Hopefully I'm relatively on time, and I will need to drop off the call in about 30 minutes, but I am active in the chat at this point, so I'm happy to take any FDA-related questions in the chat up until I need to drop off. So thanks again to the hosts, and Melissa, I'll turn it back over to you. Thanks very much.
No, thank you very much, Jeffrey, for the presentation and always making yourself available. To speak to exporters from the region. And there are some few questions that will also with regard to you. So please, if you can address them in the chat, but we hope that will still be available in the next 10 or so minutes when we go to Q&A. And also, as I invite Mr. Vishnu, let me also just request that we are running a bit behind on time in terms of a few minutes. So I will request for all participants, if it is fine with you, that maybe we may go over by 5 or so minutes just to accommodate all the questions that we have received so that they can receive particular responses from our speakers. So Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Vishnu Munen from Turner Shipping, Customs Manager, to speak to us on logistics and shipping to the United States. Vishnu, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Malos. Thank you very much. Good day, ambassadors and excellencies and everyone joining today. My presentation is just going to come up shortly.
Welcome to Turner Shipping. We'd like to introduce our company and our range of services to you. In 1896, when sailing ships and ox wagons were the primary means of transport, Turner Shipping opened its doors as a customs clearing agent at the then newly established Port of Durban. Today, more than 120 years later, that port is one of the busiest on the African continent, and Turner Shipping is arguably the biggest privately owned clearing and forwarding company in Southern Africa. We have 12 offices in the main centers throughout South Africa and provide services in all of the Southern African countries. In partnership with BDP International, we also provide logistics solutions to clients on a worldwide basis. In keeping with the very high standard that the industry demands, Turner Shipping is both accredited by and a member of all the necessary local and international associations and organizations. We pride ourselves on our ethical corporate governance, with company policies which ensure ethics, compliance, and risk management in all that we do. Our IATA-approved air freight facility allows for service delivery to and from all the major airports on a national and worldwide basis. The special arrangement with BDP International allows for maximum efficiencies to be maintained on sea freight shipments. Road freight deliveries are undertaken for both local and international shipments, which attend to and conform to all Incoterm requirements, ensuring that cargo is successfully collected and delivered on a full or part load basis is the objective and foundation of our logistics excellence. Turner Shipping also provides a range of specialized value-added services, and our team of specialists are well-versed in all the complex customs and excise regulations and requirements. We have established an excellent network of logistics partners throughout Africa, enabling us to operate effectively in a challenging environment. All shipments need to be covered by insurance, and through our business partners at JLT Group, we are able to provide our clients with a comprehensive and tailor-made marine insurance package. While customs clearing remains our core business, we pride ourselves on the expertise in the wider world of logistics management, ensuring both imports and exports are correctly and adequately attended to by our team of professionals. Trade finance is an additional value-added service offered by Turner Shipping. We provide procurement finance to both importers and exporters on a 120-day basis. Large and outsized project-type shipments are managed from source to destination by our Project Freight division. Our nationwide warehousing division can attend to all storage and distribution needs on a national basis. In short, Turner Shipping offers a full range of logistics services to and from any location on the planet. Our real-time track and trace system enables us to provide up-to-date shipment status reports on a 24/7 basis. Through the Turner's Training Academy, our own staff members and those of our clients can extend their skills and be educated in all aspects of the customs clearing and freight forwarding industries. We readily embrace sustainability and contribute to efforts as we look forward to a greener planet. Turner Shipping's promise to clients is to ensure that we always meet their requirements with industry professionalism and serve
Mr.
Thank you,
Vishnu,
Melos. I think we'll go into the presentation now. Good day, ambassadors and excellencies and everyone joining today. Thank you everyone for being so engaging. I've just seen a lot of questions pop up during this video for me as well. So hopefully I will try my best to answer all of the questions that you have phrased for us. I am Vishnu Munian. I'm the National Customs Manager at Turner's Shipping. And prior to joining Turner's Shipping, I spent more than a decade at the South African Revenue Services Customs. And I will be using this brief moment to touch on the basics of shipping to the US and some of our expertise as Turner's Shipping. Sorry.
Please go ahead, Mr. Vishnu. If maybe you can conclude the presentation in the next 5 minutes, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, no, that's fine. Sorry. There is a slideshow that's supposed to have come up now. I'm just waiting for that, Melos. Melos, the slide show that's supposed to come up.
In the absence of the slide, is it possible that you can go ahead?
Okay.
Just give few remarks.
Okay, no, that's fine.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah, so basically, just to chat a bit about Turner's Shipping, we've been around for 125 years, and this year, and our international partner is BDP, and BDP's head office is based. Okay, BDP's
Welcome
head
to
office
Turner's
is
Shipping.
based-
We'd like to introduce.
Sorry. BDP's head office is based in Philadelphia in the US. Basically, in Philadelphia, there is one of the world's largest markets, fresh produce market, and that is the Philadelphia fresh produce market. And I urge buyers, exporters in South Africa to spend some time on this website for the Philadelphia fresh produce market, because it is the world's largest market. And spending some time researching this facility would also give you access to some of the traders in the market as well. So despite COVID last year, there's a bit that happened during the course of the year from this region slide. During last year, there was $540,000 worth of vegetables that left the region during the course of the year. And the next slide will show you that during the period in 2020, a staggering $177 million of fruit was exported from the region, despite COVID and despite all of the shipping constraints that were faced during the year as well. And then the last product was the spices. And on the next slide, which is your coffee, tea, and spices. And that was $9 million. So basically, in terms of the highest exported products to the US, these are the three highest commodities as well. The next slide is as reported by our BDP office in the US. And the air freight situation is that there's no passenger flights, but there are regular freighters. And hopefully that will change without changes in lockdown and the easing of restrictions in South Africa. The next slide speaks to sea freight. And here there's a red dot. The red dot signifies that there is still congestion on the west coast of the US. Thankfully, most of our shipping happens on the East Coast, and that's where the Philadelphia market is as well. In terms of freight trends during the course of the year, exports has not been drastically affected as import rates. In terms of exports for a 20-foot, you've got average pricing still lingering at $2,500 for a 20-foot and just over $4,500 for a 40-foot container. Now, there is an upward trend but hopefully it doesn't extend to the range of import rates at the current standard. On the next slide, just to chat a bit about consolidation. When you are unable to fill a container for exports, we are able as Turner Shipping to consolidate cargo from various consignees, from various exporters going to a single consignee or vice versa, and we are able to pack a container. There's a video following my presentation that actually speaks to this, and we are currently doing this for some of the clients in South Africa that are sending air freight cargo. Slide 11 is the basic process of exporting. I won't talk about each of the processes. This is just a map that details exactly what needs to be done for every process of the export. And one of the most important lessons we've learned over the years, in the next slide, is a mandatory importer security filing that's necessary for all exports from the region to the US. So this has to be provided prior to cargo being exported, and it forms an important part of the export process. Earlier on, we spoke about phytosanitary certificates and having all the necessary approvals from the South African authority. The next slide is just an example of a DAF permit, a phytosanitary certificate that's issued by the South African authorities for exporting canned and frozen vegetables as well. And the last slide is our contact details. So in closing, I'd like to share a video of what we're currently doing for perishable exports. And thank you, everyone. And I encourage you to make contact with us directly if I'm unable to answer your question during the Q&A session. And yes, hoping for some fruitful engagement following this.
Thank you very much, Vishnu, for the presentation. I will share the video with the participants. I've requested due to time if we can go straight to Q&A so that some of the questions that the participants have can also be addressed. But thank you very much for sharing
Thank you, Belosi. Thank you for the opportunity.
The value chain of exporting to the US. So I think maybe on that point, Vishnu, just to start with you, it is, I think one question which came towards the end was if, as you facilitate exports of companies from the SADC region to the US, are there any specific issues or problems that companies are encountering when they export to the US that you would like to bring it to attention of the participants?
Well, the FDA requirements were pretty strict on certain produce and labeling requirements. I think from an exporting perspective, we need to have the necessary registrations in place in terms of exporter codes, the basic requirements for that. Like I showed you the example for the phytosanitary certificates. So based on the commodity being exported, we need to have all of that and in terms of the requirements for the export first ironed out before we get to the point of US requirements as well. So I think that's an important fact that we need to look at.
Thank you very much, Vishnu. Just to turn to Jeffrey, if he's still around, there is a question around import requirements and certification needed for export of cheese to the US. I think there is always a question of whether the cheese is within the FDA or within the USDA. So I just wanted to check first with yourself, Jeffrey, if it is within FDA. And there is also a question on exporting of alcoholic products to the US, just to check if there is any link which potential exporters of alcoholic products can follow, or the requirements where they can see the requirements. Jeffrey? Is Jeffrey still around?
Jeffrey says he wants to remain on mute. If the question is put in the chat box, he will respond.
All right. No, thank you very much for that. So can you just repeat the question again to Jeffrey in the mute in the chat box? The other question, which maybe to Robert, one of the questions that came was, where can companies find information on products that qualifies for exports to the US under AGOA, GSP, and so on? And there is another question that can also go to our colleagues from the US Department of Agriculture around where companies can check if the agricultural products that they are exporting are eligible for export to the US. So maybe, Robert, you can start first, and then Vion and Dete, and also Jason can come in.
Thanks, Melosi. To answer that, I would say there are a number of resources. I mean, certainly, I think all the folks at the Southern African Trade Hub could be helpful in that regard. But I can say also the U.S. International Trade Commission, USITC.gov, has a whole portal on different individual products to look up that can be helpful for that. But then also different reports that are out there, such as the biennial report to Congress that I mentioned before, and as well as we haven't talked about the AGOA.info site that's based out of South Africa that has a lot of very helpful information as well. So I think those are all very good places to start.
No, thank you very much, Robert. And I think we'll share the links if it has not been shared. If you can, maybe you can share the link in the chat box, and then participants can have it. From colleagues from the US FDA, where can companies check if the primary agricultural products that they're exporting are eligible for export to the US? In particular, I think there is a question around cooked meat. Ms. Lopez or Mr. Evans?
Thank you. I can address the import questions regarding fresh fruits, vegetables, or live animals and genetics. That is the area that the Animal, Plant, and Health Inspection over which has purview. I have put the links in the chat box, but for example, on the area of animals, we have a portal, a database that shows the commodities that are eligible to come into the United States by country. They simply would have to click on the link and then click on imports coming into the United States. And likewise, there's an export button to see which items are eligible for export from the United States into other countries on a country by country basis. The same for the fresh fruits and vegetable links. It shows which items are already eligible and the import conditions for coming into the United States. Now, for items that are not listed on those links, then the partner government would have to issue a market access request to our Veterinary Services Authority or our National Plant Protection Organization, and accompanied by technical information, such as the status of any relevant pests and diseases, and even market feasibility studies are helpful. And those would be the ways to initiate a market access request on a commodity that's not already listed on our portal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lopez. Jason, anything to add?
And similarly, FSIS would have the same databases available for the meat and dairy, or meat and poultry and egg products as well. So, and similarly, if those products are not available on the export-import libraries, the partner government would need to work with us to make those requests.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it is important to just note on this, as Ms. Lopez have mentioned, and also Mr. Evans, around the importance of checking with the respective governments in the SADC region, whether the product qualifies or not, and also if the product doesn't qualify, to start the process of initiating the market access request. There is a question that I will just squeeze in, which will probably be the last question, and other question, please feel free to send to the organizers. They will continue to be addressed offline or forwarded to the speakers. The one question I just wanted to check with Joanne was on the sugar quota, where information can be found, and whether if the issue of first come, first serve, or when the quota is filled for export of sugar. Is Joanne still with us? If not, I think we can proceed. Other questions I would like to encourage the participant will be responded to tomorrow during the marketplace. In the marketplace, we have a buyer that will be making a presentation. Then we'll also have 2 exporters that will also be speaking about their experiences on exporting to US, touching on issues like chocolate. There is questions on chocolate, so they will be touching on some of those issues. So I would really encourage participants to again join us tomorrow as we discuss and participate in the marketplace. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the closing remarks, and I would like to invite His Excellency Francis Bulamoene, the Dean of SADC Group of Ambassadors in Washington, D.C., and the Ambassador of the Democratic Republic of Congo, to provide the closing remarks. His Excellency, you have the floor, sir. Is the Excellency present? I think at the beginning I did see the Excellency present in the event. I think in the, while we are still waiting for Excellency, just maybe to give it a minute, maybe if there is a problem.
Hello, hello. Hello.
Hi, Excellency.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Voilà. Monsieur le Président du groupe des ambassadeurs de la SADC aux États-Unis d'Amérique, Son Excellence Edouard Sawaringera, ambassadeur de Malawi aux États-Unis, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs de la SADC aux États-Unis et chers collègues, chers membres du corps diplomatique de la SADC aux États-Unis d'Amérique, distingués opérateurs économiques de la SADC et distingués invités. Merci pour votre participation au premier jour de ce webinaire qui a pour thème une source fiable de produits frais et de qualité de la SADC. Je tiens particulièrement à remercier mes collègues ambassadeurs de la SADC aux États-Unis, les membres du corps diplomatique des pays de la SADC aux États-Unis, le Centre de commerce et d'investissement de l'USAID en Afrique australe pour avoir organisé et hébergé ce webinaire de partage d'informations afin de promouvoir les exportations de produits agricoles et agroalimentaires de notre région vers les États-Unis. Je voudrais aussi reconnaître les efforts de nos partenaires de l'Afrique du Sud et de l'équipe de l'USAID pour la réalisation de ces webinaires. Et je souhaite sincèrement féliciter et remercier tous les participants du secteur public et privé de pays éligibles à l'AGOA de la SADC et nos divers partenaires des États-Unis qui ont honoré de se joindre à ces webinaires par leur présence active. Les discussions que nous avons eues jusqu'à présent ont été très intéressantes, approfondies et instructives. Je suis sûr que demain, elles seront tout aussi enrichissantes. Au cours des 10 premières années de mise en œuvre, le total des exportations africaines vers les États-Unis dans le cadre de l'AGOA a presque septuplé, passant de 7,6 milliards de dollars en 2001 à 52,1 milliards de dollars en 2011. Autrement dit, les bénéfices de l'AGOA sont indéniables et il est recommandé à tous nos opérateurs économiques de la SADC d'en tirer le plus d'avantages comparatifs possible en élargissant la liste des produits à exporter en franchise de droit d'entrée aux États-Unis conformément aux règles de l'AGOA. Permettez-moi de conclure la séance d'aujourd'hui en rappelant à tous que la région de la SADC est attrayante pour les investisseurs américains car nous sommes la prochaine frontière économique du monde. Merci encore pour votre participation et je souhaite vous voir plus nombreux et plus actifs demain pour le deuxième jour de ce webinaire. Merci et à demain.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Just before we close, I just wanted to just reiterate again, please join us tomorrow, as Excellency has mentioned, tomorrow at 3 p.m. on the South African time. I think in Tanzania, it will be 1 hour ahead or behind, and in the US, it will be 9 a.m. So we'd like to encourage everyone to join tomorrow. We have buyers that will be sharing their experience of doing business with SADC. We have exporters, and we hope all the participants can join us. With those words, I would like to thank Excellencies today for their participation and also to the US government officials that have joined. Thank you very much. We will update the contact list and share with all the participants. The contact list will have all the trade officials from SADC embassies, and it will be shared so that whatever challenges you may be encountering, you can contact your specific trade attaché or someone from the embassy on this side of the US. Thank you very much, and the webinar is closed.